Okay, so this is the last um, part of Chapter 9, Microeconomics Chapter 9, Decision Making by Individuals and Firms. I call it Part 3, although this is the fourth video, because in Part 2 we had two parts to Part 2. Anyway, so this last part is really a pretty interesting area of economics that ideally I would love to spend much more time talking about in this course, but we have so much other technical stuff we have to get through. That it's usually just talked about a little bit. Behavioral economics, right? Really analyzing how do people really make decisions as opposed to kind of the theory that we are normally looking at, the economic theory of people making perfectly rational decisions always, right? So with that, let's get going. So let me open that up. All right. By the way, any questions on this? Although in an online environment, it's likely true anyway. But be multiple choice things. I'm not asking for you to memorize any of these ideas. Just make sure they make logical sense to you. So you're not going to have to come up with them, I guess, out of nowhere. But you need to be able to recognize what these concepts are if you see them written. And be able to choose like a multiple choice. This represents this, for example. Okay. Okay. In general, we assume that people are rational, and we need to technically define what that means here in economics. By rational, what we're saying is, in general, we're assuming that decision makers choose the available option that makes them best off, right? Often that's the one with the highest economic payoff, but not necessarily, because there's all kinds of opportunity costs and hard to quantify benefits of things. But in general, people are being rational if they make the choice that makes them best off. Okay. There are times where people are rational, right, under this definition of what rational means, but aren't necessarily picking the best option, right? And why might that happen? Or that best option for them to make them financially best off? Well, one is a scenario where, hey, part of their benefit is not necessarily the economic benefit to them, but because people care about fairness, right? Now, if you go to a restaurant, right, on someplace nowhere near where you live that you're never going to go to again, do you still tip? Most of us do, right? Because it's the social contract. Maybe we believe it's kind of it's fair, it's the reasonable thing to do. So we care about fairness. There's all kinds of other reasons why people might care about fairness in a way that doesn't maximize their economic payoff, but it makes them feel good. So, clearly can be rational. There's other times where we make a choice that isn't optimal for us, but that's because finding optimal often has a lot of opportunity cost. It's often hard to find the optimal, right? Because often we're limited in the analysis that we can do, the time that we have, the ability to be able to even analyze a situation, the right skill set. The more challenging it is to analyze something, the harder it is to identify the possible options, the more likely that we'll settle for good enough. A recent example for me is Amazon is shortly going to send me a headset which will hopefully improve the sound of these recordings or improve the sound when you come to online classes with me. I looked at different options for like 10, 15 minutes and I wasn't really confident I was picking the best one for what I was doing, but I'm not willing to spend more time. Good chance there's a better one that would have been a better choice for what I wanted, a better value, but I settled for good enough, right? So that's kind of this idea of bounded rationality. So yeah, I made it something that hopefully makes sense for me, not necessarily optimal, right? Risk aversion. Another reason why someone might pick an option that is not technically giving them the highest expected payoff, right? But because they don't want to risk too much, they're willing to accept a smaller payoff to avoid the risk. For example, Let's imagine you're on a TV show, right? A game show, like Let's Make a Deal, some kind of game show, right? Where you have the option to say, all right, you can take a guaranteed $100,000, right? A guaranteed $100,000 and go home with that. Or you can pick behind door number 2 and have a 50-50 shot at getting $300,000. But if you pick the wrong door, you get 0. Well, what's the expected payoff, right? The expected return of making the choice of going for either 50% chance of 300,000, 50% chance of 0. Well, your expected return is 150,000, right? That's on average what you would get with that choice of a 50-50 shot of 0 versus 300. So the pure answer would be, oh, you go for the 300, right? Because your expected payoff is higher with that. However, a huge percentage of us would likely pick the 100,000 because that's guaranteed. Even though it's a less likely, a smaller expected value, it's a guaranteed amount because we're risk averse. We're willing to give up that possibility of an expectation of a higher return, right? Avoid the risk. Okay. Now, beyond those types of kind of limited thinking, concerned about fairness reasons, why people might be rational but not optimal, sometimes people make decisions that aren't rational for various reasons that don't end up giving them the best choice, right? So, for example, misperception about the opportunity costs, right? Don't understand, right? Not that they haven't researched it enough, but they don't understand the costs and the benefits that are right in front of them, right? So they don't make a rational choice. I have the example here, auto mechanic, but I'm going to use a different example. Penny wise, pound foolish, right? So let's imagine someone says, ooh, thinking back from the first section of the course, hey, I can save, if I could save 10 cents a gallon buying 10 gallons of gas by driving 20 miles, I'm going to save that 10 cents a gallon by driving 20 miles to go get the cheaper gas. Well, that's not understanding the true costs that are involved, right? Because let alone the cost of your time, you're going to use more gas, right? The cost of the gas you use to save money on buying gas is going to be higher than the savings, so you're actually worse off, right? So not understanding the cost of benefits, misperception about them. Overconfidence, right? So the idea of, hey, often we think we know more than we probably do, right? So I do an investing game in macroeconomics, or I often have, where people are often trying to kind of do market timing. It's like, ooh, I think this is going to go up because this just happened. Well, good chance that they are speculating on something that they're jumping in too late, or it in fact goes the exact opposite direction. And they actually do worse, right? They're overconfident in their abilities to make a choice, so they actually end up making a suboptimal choice. Similar, sometimes we have unrealistic expectations about the future. So a great example of this is people signing up for an Ironman, right? Something, or a triathlon, a long triathlon, half Ironman or Ironman distance. I haven't done a full, but I've done like 4 half Ironmans now, and I'm always amazed that there's always like 2,400 people signed up for the race, but about 1,800 people show up, right? Why is that? Well, some of them got injured, some of them something happened, but many of those people, some of those people, hundreds of those people likely signed up for the race thinking, okay, I'm going to train for this. But the reality was they never actually did because they weren't motivated enough. Or signing up for a gym and paying for a year or 2 membership for a gym, and then after a month stop going, right? Over expectations about their discipline of what they're going to do into the future. There are other examples. I'm not going over everything that's in the textbook on this, but a fourth case of potentially, under this definition, irrational decision making mentally counting dollars unequally, right? So feeling like you're spending less money if you buy it with a credit card than if you buy it with cash. Well, obviously it's the same amount of money, if not more money, if you start paying interest on your credit card, but you think of those dollars somehow differently, right? So not really a rational choice, but something that. Another example is status quo bias, right? Tendency to avoid making a decision altogether. Easier to not to choose something than have to choose something. So basically, the book goes over an example where in Australia, almost 100% of the people choose voluntary organ donation, right? Kind of the thing that you can choose on your license here, right? In neighboring countries of Germany, Sweden, Denmark, with the book suggests culturally similar viewpoints on the I guess the benefit of doing something like that. Very different outcomes, right? Where in Germany and Denmark, dramatically smaller percentage of people, right, choose to do organ donations, and it's most of the difference has nothing to do with, right, the people being different, but has to do with how people choose into or choose out of organ donating, right? So in Sweden and Austria, you have to check the box on your license, let's say, if you don't want to donate. So making no decision means you donate, right? Whereas in Germany and Denmark and in the United States, you have to check the box to opt in. You have to choose to donate, right? So this is true in an example like this. It's true in companies where saving for retirement, right? For some companies, they automatically put a part of your paycheck into your 401k, into your retirement account. If you, unless you check a box that says don't do it, but if you have to opt in, right, far smaller percentage of people that work for companies that say, all right, yes, I want to donate 3% of my salary, put it into retirement. Well, in a company like that, a far smaller percentage of them put money into retirement than in a company where they automatically do, unless they just say, no, don't take it out of my paycheck. Similar idea, even though in both cases, people likely care about and are interested in doing the retirement just as much, but it's easier to choose nothing than to choose something. So that's basically it for I think that's it, right? Yep, that's it for the chapter 9 material. I will really be looking at your feedback to see if this was helpful.